It moed get yom te brucham abom b'shem Hashem. The Egan has the big cover to have the choshev ha'olam come again to make Ma'amad Kiddush Hashem of Chol HaMoed. Shurim Chol HaMoed used to be Chol HaMoed, and now Baruch Hashem all over in all neighborhoods wherever you are, in Borough Park, in Muncie, in Lakewood, Williamsburg, and it's Israel, 10 places. Thousands of Bnei Torah come to get chizuk, shiurim, and learn sdorim. Today in the morning there was hundreds of people here with children over Sabanim Yeshivas Chol HaMoed with prizes for alle kinder, and then they come to shiurim. It's a big Ma'amad Kiddush Hashem, Baruch Hashem. Today we have the chus to have with us again, like every Sunday, Rabbi Yakov Zev who gives shiurim and halacha every Sunday, but Chol HaMoed is a special treat of chizuk v'soiris. Today's Ma'amad Kiddush Hashem, like always, is Yidenu Rabbi Avraham Eliyahu Spry, who's one of the Ma'amad Kiddush Hashem of Rabbi Smith every Chol HaMoed. The Steve Hashem benched him in Nachas and the Kinder and the Enekelech v'tzach simcha v'nachas. And now I have the covered discuss to call upon Rabbi Smith from today's Shir, the topic of Echas BeLev Echad. Rabbi Smith Shlita.
The Gemara in Shabbos Lamarav tells a famous story that the guy came to Hillel and he wanted to learn Kol HaTorah Kula Regel Achas, which of course is an impossibility. But Hillel answered him and he told him, Aloch Sani Lechavrach Leisavid Zeu Kol HaTorah Kula Ve'idich Pirusha Zil Gemar. And of course it's surprising that Kol HaTorah Kula, where's Ben Adam Lamokai? And also the obvious kasha is Hillel was telling him, obviously, V'aftarecha kamoicha. So why did he say that? Why did he have to make an egg in a chiddush? You know, today in yeshiva there's the Yitzhara to make an egg in a chiddush. You know, you take someone's chiddush, you know, Reuven shemachal Shimon, Nira, Ulai, who I did, Shimon shemachal Reuven. Oh, an egg in a chiddush. Why did Hillel not say Develikim Chayim V'aftarecha kamoicha? But the bigger kasha is it bichlal possible to live v'after acha kamoicha? The Heilige Ramban al Torah says it's an afloga, it's an exaggeration, it's not shaykh. You can't expect the person to love someone like himself. So how does Hillel tell a guy v'after acha kamoicha when the Heilige Ramban struggles to understand what it means? And we paskin chayecha koidmin. So the whole thing is very strange. How do you tell a guy what even for a Yid is impossible? And I think there's a tremendous yisoid here that we could take l'maisa. Reb Chaim Kreisworth used to say, "B'didei havi uvda." He was learning. He's a bach in yeshiva in Europe, and he was waiting to get. They had a very small dormitory, if you call it such, but you know there was a few beds, and he was waiting a long time to finally get a bed. When Taki got a bed. That night was the first night he would have to go schlep to one of the balabatim, and it was Mamish in the yeshiva, and he was very excited about this. And that night he's going closer to his bed, his new bed, and he sees a blind bach and ebach who's groping in darkness. Says, "Where's the dormitory?" I guess he didn't know that there is no dormitory, and he had no place to sleep. Reb Chaim knew exactly that if he's going to say there's no dorm, he's going to be stuck. So in a moment of greatness, obviously, he decided to give this bacha his bed, and he'll fend for himself. And Kachavi, he gave his bed, and he had to wait a few more months till he got another bed. A few years later, Hitler Yamach Shemai came, and the Nazis attacked his yeshiva, and they shot one after the other, one bacha the other, and threw them out the window. And Chaim said he doesn't know why, but he turned to the Baruch Rebbeinu Shalom. I was mavater once. I ate my bed. Please give the Nazi the heart to be mavata my life. Very strange request. Where do you see an Amalek being mavata? And he's waiting in line to be shot to death. And he comes close, and it's his turn, and he says, "Please, I'm young. Please let me live." And the Nazi says, I can't do much, but I'll shoot up in the air, fall down dead, and I'll throw you out the window, and good luck." And the rest, like you say, is history. That's the way he survived. And you think about the story, it's amazing. And you think about a Nes Shaloika Derech HaTeva, a Nazi should be Mavata. Why did Baruch Shalom make such a Shini HaTeva? Because there's a superpower in this world called a Mavata. It's not such a chiddush. That's the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, Daf Yud Zayin. Kol amava midoisem avin al kol pshav. But that's the golden amida of a mavata. You know, it's very hard to type that word in English. Give in, yield, forego, defer. But hagufa kasha, what is the greatness of a mavata? The Gemara says in Megillah, B'mariach Yamim, I was mavata. The Gemara says in Bava Basra, Daf Tezvav Beis, Iyoy Vatrim B'mamoinoi. And you learn the Gemara, he gave up a half a pruta. So what's the godless of a half a pruta? There's something very special about a mavata, which I think is really the aside of the Gemara that we began with. Reb Shimon Shkop in the Hagdama to Shara Yosha has a shtickle in the Hagdama that should be required reading. He speaks about a midah that's the aside and the shirish of our life. And that's the pasuk Kedoshim Tiyu. Now the truth is, when you hear the word Kedusha, and I'm the first to plead guilty, we get a little intimidated. We think about Kedusha being Tanesim and Sigufim and Gilgul Sheleg and precious, and what do we have shaykhs to Kedusha? And Reb Shimon is saying that's the Tachlis, Megamas Chayenu Kedusha, Kedoshim Tiyu. But the question is even more penetrating. Because the Medrash on the Pasuk, Medrash in the end of Perek Chav Dalet, Kedoshim Tiyu, which already is a tall order. Yachol Kamoini, you might think that me and you, we have to be with Kedushas Ribono Shel Olam. Talmud Loyma ki Kadosh ani, Kedushasi l'mayla mi Kedushaschem. That means without Gzeres HaKosav ki Kadosh ani, me and you have to have Kedusha like Bari Olam. We don't know what the word Kedusha means, and this is our Tachlis, and we have to reach the level of Kedoshim Tiyu ki Kadosh ani. Zok Reb Shimon, one expression of Kedusha we could all live with. Kedusha of the Ribono Shel Olam, and I quote his word, is the Ribono Shel Olam's only ratzon lehetiv in hanivroyim. The Ribono Shel Olam created a world to provide for us, and we could add, Shimon Takis quotes that, Al Pi Kabbalah, why do you have to have the whole concept of schar v'oinish? So the schar should be with a shleimus. It shouldn't be an ahamad de kisufa. We have to deserve it. That he quotes Ramchal, the Ribono Shel Olam wanted to be meitiv hatova shleima. Spitz kedusha is spitz hatova. The Ribono Shel Olam, if I'm allowed to say this, is kulay yenim. You know, they in the Agdama to the Nefesh HaChaim, they write there, Reb Chaim Volozhin never stopped saying, Zeh kol adam lo la'atzmei nivra rak lahoya la'achina b'chol asher yimtze b'koichei la'asois. Spitz getlichkeit is lo la'atzmei. And that's the tachlis that we all could achieve if we work in it. Tracht von jenem, being a mative, helping another eat is not just gutzkeit, it's heiligkeit, it's the hoibenkeit, it's kedoshim tiyu. And I must add, it's not Reb Shimon's chiddush. You learn Shas, you see it all over. Shabbos Kuf Lamed Gimel, Zekeli v'anveyu have a doimeloi. How could I be like Bari Olam? So the Gemara, Maharachum v'chanan. Rashi says, "V'anveyu anivahu." I become a chutanim with the Ribono Shel Olam. Why? Because I have the gutzkeit that is really heiligkeit. Or how about Soiti Yudal Achri Hashem Alekechem Teilechun? How could a person follow the Ribono Shel Olam's ways? It's Eisha Oichla. And the Gemara says, "B'kachoylem nichem aveilem chesed." Rabbi Yoina teaches the pasuk V'alach the bedrach of Parshas Ki Savoy is going on Tikkun Amidus. That's Rabbi Yoina Shari Tshuva Gimel Amid Vav. And maybe we could hear that's V'havta Re'acha Kamoicha. And what's the end? Ani Hashem. It's not just gutzkeit, it's der hoibenkeit. It's getlichkeit. It's kedoshim tiyu. And doik v'tishkach. This midah of yenem is not just the yisoid of in adam l'chaveroi. It's also in adam l'mokim. Davening is very geschmack. But for the me, for the anoichi, sleeping. He has a chazak, he's sleeping, he doesn't want to get up. Torah is masukah midvash. But for the me, tachlis, money. And life is one power struggle of mi baroish. Or like the famous Taich, Rav Dessler quotes it, Parshas Veschanan, Anoichi oimeid bein Hashem uveinechem. The me, the zich, is the barrier, is the brick wall that prevents a person from jumping into the taiva that's called Torah, or the thrill that's called tefillah. Because the me, the gashmi, doesn't enjoy the daven, doesn't enjoy the learning. And if that was ever a challenge in the world that we live in, the world that's known as the me generation, I think today it's the only me generation. I once saw someone wearing a t-shirt, I love me. It's bad enough you live that way, but you're not embarrassed. But that's the world that we live in. Mendel Kaplan, he came to America, he heard about the dismal state of Yiddishkeit in America. He said, but one thing I see the Olam is very makbid in. The first word of the Dibris, Anoichi. That everybody's very makbid in. That describes the American scene. Shimon Taich is talking that Hagdama, Kishani la'atzmi. If life is all about me, ma'ani, what a pathetic, what a pitiful existence. That's your life, just the me, the me, the me, the me. But then there's the Kedusha that changes from ani la'atzmi to loy la'atzmoi. That's Spitz Kedusha. That every time that a person tracht von jenem, he's chipping away at that anoichi, that barrier, that brick wall, that's oimid bein Hashem uveinechem. Until a person develops a taste to a true taiva that's called Torah. To the me wants Torah. Because the me, ani, kirbes elikim, li toiv. Now he has a different sense of values. He's no longer a me generation. He's what the Pasuk in Mishlei says, Taivas Odam Chazdoi. Zokter al-Bag, a person's greatest pleasure is helping another Yid. Because that's the ultimate Getlichkeit. The godless of Mavata is not how much he gives, but his attitude. Think about him, Mavata. I'm right. So am I giving in? Because, who said I have to be the one, mi beroish? He's right and he gives something up. That means he's showing that I am in charge and I'm running the show. And the mi beroish is yenim. And the mi beroish is vos vil de Rebbeinu Shalom. So his ben Adam Chaveri is different. His ben Adam Hamokim is different. There's a person that the anoichi is no longer oimid bein Hashem uveinechem. And it starts by a person was tracht von yenim. Like Rashi says, is another Yid, is Bari Yolam, it's all the same. It's negating the miyut atzmi, turning loyla atzmi into an kshanila atzmi, turning the hanila atzmi into loyla atzmi nivra. I remember like yesterday, but a long time ago, after Rapam was nifta, so a Rebbe that was together with him in the yeshiva told me Rapam's mother was nifta when Rapam was in the mid-60s. And an Oval, of course, can't go to Chassidus. But he decided that if a Talmud gets married, he's going to go to the Chassidus hall, wish the Chassidus Mazda, and go home. So the Rebbe told me, after a while, he realized that Pam's going every night to a Chassidus when he was taught to. So he says, I understand once in a while, but every night you're going, and he was no youngster, like every night. So Pam looked and said, I don't understand you. For me, it's every night, but for the Chassidus, it's once in a lifetime. Why should I deprive the chassan the once in a lifetime? That's not just gutzkeit. That's getlichkeit. A person sees the beyond the me. He's no longer overwhelmed by the anila atzmi. And he realized, loyla atzmi. It's not just me, it's the chassan. Because the truth is, if a person is thinking, he knows exactly what to do. But the problem is a person doesn't think. It's very easy to understand that Yenim will have a simcha, let me do it. But if a person is just busy with the me, So, man dechar shmei yenim. I want to tell you a davar nifla. Maybe it's kedai to come just for this yisoid. A number of years ago, I wanted to give a shir about the haftar echka moicha, the halacha parameters of it, the halacha lamaisa. So as you know, how derech is, we look up all the Gemaras. It's no big chachma. You take out a chumash on the side, it says all the Gemaras. And I want to see where in the Gemara do we find halacha lamaisa after echka moicha. So it's mavel harayin. I'm going to give you a choice. What do you think the haftar echka moicha means halacha lamaisa? Chesed, bikachoylem, lichem avelim, halva'ah. I'll tell you none of the above. I found 12 Gemaras, some of them overlap, so there's 12 Gemaras, 6 halachas. And as I wrote my own, Shulchan Aruch Hilchos V'Haftar Echka Moicha. And let me tell you what it's all about. There's 3 Gemaras, actually, Sanhedrin twice and Bava Kama once, where the base haskila, to give Misas Bezna of skila, has to be 2 kaimas, 2 stories high. For the Gemara, we all know that to 10 tvachim is gedei sheyamas. So why do you have to build such a high base haskila? 10 tvachim is enough. So Rashi says sheyamas maher. Rabbi, we're talking about a yid. Was is a mitzvah emtze bagraben. You know, people say a mitzvah emtze bagraben. It's hard to find that person. But this person is an ishpela. Once in 70 years Mishnah. But this person got Mises Bezdin. And if Bezdin is not thoughtful and considerate and caring enough to try to minimize his busha, his tsar, they violated our Kol Torah Kula. 3 Gemaras, we have to is be thoughtful and caring for the suffering of a Rasha that got Mises Skila. That's Sif Aleph. Siv Beis, a little variety, is how to give Misa Sayif. And I'm not going to get into the gory details, but in Ksubas Lamed Zayin, how to give Sayif the most painless way. The third Sif is Psachim and Sanhedrin, how to give the Misa of Sreifa, like Misa Bnei Aaron. No. The most painless way, the Amakra, the Misa Yafa. But to me, the most unbelievable is the 4th Gemara, the 4th Sif. And that's Soita Daf Chesam at Beis, where the Gemara has a havin, maybe we should also be Mavaza the Rasha, so people will see that crime doesn't pay. V'chiteim elevet b'tarti misu busha, Rab Nachman, Amakra, v'havtu yachkamoicha, beror loy misu yafa. We're not talking about suffering. We're talking about maintaining, preserving the dignity. And we'd say dignity of who? Of a Rasha? But if Bezdin doesn't think about the dignity, if Bezdin not worrying about the busha of the Rasha, that's a flagrant violation of our Kol Torah Kula. You know why? Because he's not a piece of dirt. He's a piece of Elikus. A Yid is a shtik Elikus, but tell him Elikim. And if there's anything less than full sensitivity to a Rasha, that's a violation of our Kol Torah Kula. So you know what Hilchas V'Haftar Echka Moicha and Shulchan Aruch is? Sif Aleph is Skila, Sif Beis is Sayif, Sif Gimel is Sreifa, and Sif Dalet is maintaining the dignity of a Rasha. But you know it's even more startling, because we wonder V'Haftar Echka Moicha is going on a Rasha. Don't we know the different halachas regarding a Rasha, a bad person? So you know we asked the Kasha, the Yad Ramah on that in Sanhedrin, Daf Nun Beis. He says, it's Pashit. V'yahavta l'reyacha is v'loshin of Rasha b'cha. Our Kol Torah Kula is trachting for the Rasha b'cha. A third of V'yahavta l'reyacha moich is going on the Rasha b'cha. Reyacha is Rasha b'cha. You know why? Because if you're thinking about a Rasha, how much more so for your spouse or your neighbor? Or your worker, he's also a shtikal likus, maybe more than the Rosh Hashanah. But the difference is, are we thinking tracht von jenem? But we're not finished. There's another Gemara that we all probably know. Kedusha Mem Aleph, Asla Adam Shekadosh is Isha Achirena. Shem Meir Badav Magunav, Disganalav, Rachmanav, V'havta Re'acha Kamoicha. Tyre Yidden, we're talking about a heilige bacha. Who by him Shmir Sanayim is of such importance, he's willing to get married without looking. Blind date, the Shenein Mo blind date. You're talking about a leap of faith. He's going to marry without looking. Spitz Kedusha, the Heibenkeit. Zog Bari Yolam, Spitz the Heibenkeit is think Shema. Now, what are the chances him, David Maguna? He's obviously Mufka Moilam Hazel. He's going to marry without looking. But you never know. But that's trachten. Because Taka Shmir Sanayim is the Heibenkeit. But you know what Spitz the Heibenkeit is, Getlichkeit is V'havta Re'acha Kamoicha. And the other Gemara Taka Nida Yud Zayin can be Meshamish Mitase Bayoim. Shem Meir Badav Maguna, but there's Gana love again. There's a Shema, trachting what's going to be. I wanted so much to find it, but I didn't find it. But probably it says someplace. Maybe that's the V'havta L'Rayachim Lashon Rayasi, like we said in Shir Shim the other night. V'havta L'Rayachim Rayasi, because sometimes a person is very good outside, and he's a good and he's always busy and helping, but at home, he never gets honored. He never gets covered. And the real litmus test of Midas is V'havta L'Rayachim Rayasi. So Sif Hey is the Beinish Le'ishtay. And what's the sixth halacha? Also Daven Nifla. Sanhedrin Pei Dalet Amud Beis, 12th Gemara. Ben Maushe Yakais Dam La'aviv. Parents need a little drawing of blood. Rav Nasa says it's mutter. V'havta Re'acha Kamoicha. And Rashi says, and that's the Yesod. Would you mind if your son did it to you when you need it? So that's the way your son could treat the father. Now again, halacha l'maisa we're not meko. But the attitude that V'havta Re'acha Kamoicha is daloch sani. Almost like Rashi says, like Huzu Yisrael Milas L'Chaverim Eladava She'ein L'Chavetz L'Aseis La'atzmai. But there's another message that I think is especially important in our times. In a world that has abandoned all ideas of respect and kavod, in a world that Kibbud Av, has been revised, Kabed as Bindcha ve'es Bitecha. The father's the driver and the shopper, and the mother is Rachmana Litzlan, the cook and the maid and the butler. The Torah reminds us that that's where Ahavas Yisrael begins. It's something neglected, but that's the biggest nisayon. Because the son is Hamish with his parents. But that's where Ahavas Yisrael stelzachais and shows in the most dramatic way. And the Frat, Baruch Hashem, 1,000 times we're zeicha today to have parents that are living longer. And you could have a person, we call him in the sandwich generation, and he's a Zayd already, and he has parents. He doesn't have a moment to breathe, and where does he have time for parents? But that's where it starts. That's where Ahavas Yisrael starts. Parents are the first on our list. But do you notice the Tzad HaShava, 6 halachas? It's all training us to think. Sometimes we don't think. By the Rashi, by the Rayossi, by parents. Reminds me of what I once said. I made a cheshbon. There are 16 times in the Torah speaks about how we treat animals. Some are mamish mefurish, some are ramozim. 16 times about bein adam la behema lahavdil. So the chinuch writes in a few places, it's training for ourselves. To train ourselves, if you're thinking tzar balachayim deraisa, and how about tzar balayadam? The problem is, we don't think. And the Torah is giving us training. Training even with a Rasha, how much more so with an Erlich Yid? And that's Getlichkeit. A person that's living Shema, he's thinking, he'll be a better person, and a better neighbor, and a better boss, and a better husband, and a better son. And he'll turn the Kshani la'atzmi into loy la'atzmai. I once said a word, I was afraid to say it, but I found the shlos has come out this word. We are called Adam. Because like the Pasuk says, we have very humble beginnings, Adama. But we have a potential to turn the Adama into Adama la'elyon. Not the Kfira of Titus, But the Getlichkeit of Mahu Afatah, of Alachte B'drachav, of Zekeli V'anvehu, that I could become more of a Shtika Likus, because my Gutzkeit is Getlichkeit. Chazon Ish in his last years would go once a year to Panovich Yeshiva for Akofis. And naturally, the whole yeshiva, Rabbanim Talmideha, walked him home after that Akofis. It was probably the most dramatic display of Kavod HaTorah that Eretz Yisrael has ever seen. The Doili Yisrael following the Chazon Ish. And one year he was walking home, being surrounded by this extraordinary display of Kavod. He noticed on the side that Yid was standing there and looked very depressed. So the Chazon Ish ignored the Kavod, went over and says, "What is?" He says, "People are not machshir me, I feel worthless." And the Chazon Ish was shattered. I mean, his leiv was so focused and so tuned in. And he talked to the third person, he says, "Mark Kvoide, please choose a niggin that you like." And the fellow took him up in the office and started singing a niggin. And the Heilige Chazon Ish started dancing in front of this Yid, like a bacha dancing in front of the Chosin. The Chazon Ish, that a moment ago didn't have an ounce of strength, somehow with renewed strength started dancing in front of this Yid, like he danced in front of the Chosin. And hundreds of eyes were feasting on this beautiful scene of Adam Elo Elyon, of Kedoshim Tiyu and all its Getlichkeit, because there was a Yid that was thinking, that saw someone and saw beyond the me. You know, we'd be in that matzav, he would think about the Kavod HaTorah, and he saw it's a brach in the hearts, because he couldn't be soivel it's a brach in the hearts. And that's spitz Getlichkeit. Don't we know the pasuk in Yeshaya describing the Bereshit in glowing terms, Ram Venisa, Sheichenad V'Kadosh, and what is Bari Olam? Lahachya is ruach shvalim, ulahachya is leiv nitkoyim. That a person that has a sensitivity to sense it's a brach in the hearts, that's Getlichkeit. But there's something else that they saw. The Heilige Chazon Ish himself in a letter, in the Igeres Aleph Yud Gimel, he writes, Ish hazoichel yediyas haTorah. What does that mean, yediyas haTorah? He said the other day in the Agoda Kulam, yoidnes haTorah. What does it mean, yediyas haTorah? He knows how to learn. Zok the Chazon Ish, v'zel l'shoyin kotshei. Rotzaloyma, sha'aseichel hanitem b'nefesh, kigaryoin begumas hasodah. It's like putting a seed in the ground. But that's not enough. His ached in achachma v'hayu lebasei echad. Just like a seed in the ground becomes one, so too Yediyas Torah is not just learning Torah. It's learning Torah and knowing Torah and living Torah and breathing Torah and becoming Torah. Yediyas HaTorah is living Torah. So the Chazon Ish, and what about such a person? Who hoylach bein anoshim, v'nidmal adam haroyel einayim, kiven adam. That's another God is a fine yid, a tamachachim. Aval, so the Chazon Ish. In reality, who malach hagor in b'nei semusa, v'chayi chayi atzilois u'meroimim al kol bracha sehila. There's a yid that could be a malach b'dmus adam. There's a yid that could be spitz Getlichkeit, because he doesn't just learn Torah, he lives Torah and becomes Torah. And those hundreds of eyes were watching the beauty of Yediyas HaTorah, of a malach hagor in b'nei semusa, v'chayi chayi atzilois miroimim al kol bracha sehila. Because he was a thinking person. Because Yenim Tsar was my Tsar, and Yenim Simcha was my Simcha. He saw beyond the big me, and he saw Leila Atzmai. You know, I always wonder, in these days, we have 7 weeks to prepare for Shavuos. And what's the Tanai Koib Lamaisa, Rashi says, quoting Mechilt, Ki Ish Echad BeLev Echad. What does that mean? You know, we're very opinionated people. They say if you ask 2 Yidden for an opinion, you get 3 opinions. That's the beauty of Yiddishkeit. Gefatish Yevoy Tzisela, you know, with Shivim Ayim Panim LaTorah. But we're never Ish Echad BeLev Echad. We always have different ideas, different shittas. But you know what it is? I'll tell you. There's a Tosfos in Menachos Daf Lamed Zayin. Tosfos quotes the Medrash that when Shlomo Melech, the young 12-year-old, assumed the throne, the Ashmadai, one of the Koiches HaTumah, wanted to discredit him, to make him worthless. So created a Shaila to come to David, to come to Shlomo, and Shlomo would know, obviously. What was the Shaila? So he created someone that had two heads. And the father died, and now this two-headed person wanted a double Yerusha, because two heads is two people. But the brother with one head said, what do you mean? You have only one person? No. Ask a 12-year-old, what do you do? You ever had to Shaila two heads? Is he one? Is he two? So the Shita on the page adds, so what did Shlomo do? He boiled water and poured it on one head. And they both started screaming in pain. So Shlomo, oy bazoi ein nidn ela keish echad. If you have two people, they can be very different. But if one cries out from the tsar of the other one, al pi Torah, that's an ish echad. If someone is walking surrounded by the greatest kavod HaTorah, and he sees the loneliness, he sees the tsar of another yid, that's an ish echad BeLev Echad. That's a malach hagor with yediyas HaTorah. We're all different. We have different minhagim. That's the beauty of Yiddishkeit. But if yenem simcha is my simcha, then we're zoicha to a wonderful, unlimited opportunity of taivas odam chazdoi. And if someone's tsar bothers me, he won't have tsar for much longer because it's my problem. And that's Getlichkeit. That's the Sur Meirah of it. That's the Say Toiv of it. I'll give you a mashal. I think we all know this. The Agmas Nefesh, you're looking for a sefer. It's not on the shelf. Now, you don't have to have Ruach Kodesh to know why is it on the shelf. Because someone used it and left it on his table. You know, he's living Hu halach lemenuchais, vaisanu azav lanachais. So whoever learned, maybe knows the Rashba, but he's not living the Rashba. That's not Yediyas HaTorah. Besides the Bezoyin of the Svarim and the Bittul Torah and Kvoi that Tzibur. But that's 6 Sifim and Hilchas Avos Yisrael, Tracht von Yener, even a Rasha, and Kolshke another Yid in Beis Medrash. He's not an Achzor. But like Pascal once said, what does Achzor mean? Achzor is a conjunction of two words. Ach-zor. Yener? It's Yener. But from Achzor is very quickly become Achzor. Because the Yid that learned the Rashba, he's not a bad person, he's a very good person. But he took the attitude, Achzor, I finished, Gendik. Ani vav siyoid. But from Achzor is very quick to Achzor. I don't want to talk about the way people drive, the way people park, the way people honk, late at night, early in the morning. But that it's felt in Yediyas HaTorah. I'm always say, what's he thinking? The way he drives, he double parks on Friday afternoon, Erev Shabbos, short. The answer is, he's not thinking. He's missing in all his beauty, in all his halacha l'maisa. Rabbi Yerucham has a shmooze. I wish I could have been there. It must have been a remarkable shmooze. He tells in the Mishnah of his Perik Gimel Mishnah Beis, Ilmoli Moira Malchus Ishes Reyehu Chayim Beloi. Without a police system, a person would swallow up his friend alive. So Rabbi Yerucham had a moon in Chazal. There's no guzmois. So he goes, how could this be? You're eating your friend alive? Today I guess we can understand it. They have these big 6-foot hero sandwiches and these rolls, and maybe makes the bracha yoitzer adam, and he's not eating his friend. But how could you eat your friend alive? Don't you hear his screaming? He says that's the problem. When a person is an anoichi, etrach von sich, wenn ich esse, ist alles gestorben. He's wondering, who's making noise? Who's disturbing? He's so caught up with the anoichi, he doesn't even know, doesn't know anything, there's nothing else in the world, just me and my lunch. It's funny, but it's sad, because this is an attitude. A person when he drives, when he uses svarim, when he talks. It's achzor, but achzor vet achzor. I was once by a chassan. There must at least 10 people on the table with me. And someone said a joke about someone else sitting there. And the olam had gelacht. And it happened to be a very good joke. But I just witnessed Ritzicha. Someone was malbich Berab. What Rav Shimon bar Yochai, the Heilige Rav Shimon bar Yochai says in Bav Metzia, Noyach le'am sheyapel atzma tekifin eish, and don't do such a thing. He did it. So I felt like Pasha had an obligation. So I approached this person in private. I said, Rabbi, I don't know you, but I should just know that, he's testifying that I don't know if you realized. She looked at me like I came from Mars. He says, why don't you just chill out? He says, I was just joking. I told him, I hope that Ben Shemayla has a good sense of humor. What the Torah Akadoisha, we learn from the Torah, Mutav sheyapol atzma kifshan ha'eish from Tama, noyach loy, and the word is, on that Torah, it was easier to jump into a fight than Hashem la'chayid. And he's joking. But he wasn't a bad person, because he probably thought he made Yidden happy, he made Yidden laugh. But where was the Shema? Or maybe the Vadai? That's a bezer anpin, ish esrei eyu chayim beloy. On trachten, can make a churban. But it's lav dafka such an extreme. People have, they have nice ways of referring to it. Avertel, avitz, a joke. But that's maves biyad loshen. When does a person understand maves biyad loshen? When he's the victim of a word. Oy versteht er gut. Oy does he understand? So the Yesoid of bin Adam Chaveroi is to think. Leiv tzadik yegel anois. Ramban says, what is a pesi, a fool? What makes a Yiddish a pesi? So Ramban and Barash V'loi says lashon of pisoim. A person that talks pisoim, think spontaneously without thinking, that's a pesi. Because a person knows what's right and what's wrong. But if he talks without thinking, like a Pami used to say, nicht as ret na seretzich, it's going, he says things. If he pauses, if he thinks, he knows what's right and what's wrong. The Zalman used to say, he was once when he was sitting on the Bezdin in Slutsk, there was one of the Baalei Din Rabbis, was a woman, said a go'oinish shetaina, and she was mechaber to an asivis. I'll never forget that. A woman was mechaber to an asivis. But it's not a pliya. That's the Rebbeinu Shalom made a person, Adam Korv Eitzel Atzmai. That if he can make a few dollars, he'll become a goyin like the Nesivis. Because er versteht ganz good what's important to me. And then I was thinking, that's the emes pshat in V'haftarech Kamoy. When you look in the Cheskuni, Sepurnu, the Ksav HaKabbalah, all say the same yisoid. It doesn't mean you have to love a yid like yourself. That has to be kamoy chamamish, because that's a guzma. And we pass in chayecha koidmin. But as all these gedolei rishonim write, Kapos and Achron, what you expect Yenem to do to you, do to him. What you expect someone Yashas to treat you, treat Yenem. You know what the godless of that formula is? Get yourself involved. You just made a shidduch. And you're hoping someone will say, I know the chassan. It's a wonderful shidduch. Is that outlandish? Is that something extraordinary? So why don't you go over to someone who made the shidduch and say, I know the chassan. He's a wonderful chassan. You'll make his day. You understand it. What you like, do to others. If I could put it very bluntly, if you only have one pair of shoes, you don't have to give it to him. Don't give him your shoes, but put yourself in his shoes. You just have him for the Yom Tiv. Someone gives you Yashikayach, you feel good. You're only a mensch. So do it to him. Someone came to shul, a stranger. Go over and say, Shalom Aleichem, you come to Yid, you like the seat. When you feel out of place, you know how uncomfortable it is. But how is this all possible? It has to be Echas BeLev Echad. You have to think, you have to see. Some people walk in shul, they don't see an opportunity. What about the stranger? What about the person that just went through a difficult marriage? He lost a spouse, lost a child. How about a phone call, something? Isn't it simple? If you think it's simple. And then I realized the Chachma of Hillel. Hillel knew that the Yesod is v'hafta re'ach kamoicha. But you can't tell a guy v'hafta re'ach kamoicha if even the Heilige Ramban struggled with that. So Hillel made it very practical and very workable and very doable. The Allah Sani. You know yourself. You know ganz good that it's not a joke, it's maves. You know ganz good what type of driving aggravates people. Or let's be more positive, what a compliment is, what a nice word is. The Allah Sani, tracht. Look at the Kol Kula of even of a Russia, because it's all about thinking. But most of all, the guy must have been a decent guy. And he asked him, like, what's so special about your Yiddishkeit? And Hill told him, the Yesod of Yiddishkeit, it's Loila Atzmai. It's all about the Allah Sani, it's all about the Hafta Ech Kamoicha, Ad Kedei Kach, it's almost a guzma, but it's not. Because Yidden are not in this world for themselves. In a world that reeks from Chani La'atzmi, Yiddishkeit's Getlichkeit and the Hoibenkeit is Yenem. Yiddishkeit is Adam Lo Elyon in all its yoifi. And every time it tracht von Yenem, we're chipping away at that wall of Anoichius that's Oimid Bein Hashem Uvein Eichem. Someone once asked the Chazon Ish, what's the sea, the spitz, the zenith, the peak of Atzloch in Olam Hazeh? And he asked the right person. Chazon Ish was a moifis l'doiris of Atzloch in Olam Hazeh. And Chazon Ish responded, and I quote, durchzugehen the 70 Jahr und nicht weiton a Yid. That's the sea, the spitz of Atzloch in this world. I guess that's really what the ticket to Olam Haba. His Haru B'Kvoit Chavreichem, sagt the man Brachas Chavches, is that's the ticket to Olam Haba. You ask me how to do it? I can tell you how to start. It's one word, tracht. Tracht von Yenem, that's the Sumeira, that's the Asay Toiv, that gives you entry into this magnificent world of Taivas Odam Chazdoi. Because there's so much we could do with words. Versteht sich, we don't say nasty words. There's a pasuk. It's almost like it doesn't sound like a pasuk, but it's a pasuk in Mishlei Lemi, Oy Lemi, Avoy. Shloim is krechzing and moaning and groaning. Lemi, Oy Lemi, Avoy. Lemi Midjan, who's in Machlaikis? Lemi Siach, Lemi Petzoyim Chinam Zagrashi. A person that thinks, that talks without thinking, because Beroiv Dvarm La Yechtel Pesha. How important it is to think before we talk. We're holding someone's heart in our hands, and we can either destroy it or build it with words. Ma'aves v'chayim b'yad loshen. Pelyoyitz, when he speaks about Oino, he says, so how do you do it? Simple. Da'aloch sani l'chavrik lo'isavit. It guarantees you, gives you guidance. You know what's right and you know what's wrong. Get yourself involved. But I want to be a little more positive. There's a world of chesed that are mamish cost-free. It's interesting. The Ram in Hilchos Deis Perek Vav says a mitzvah al kol adam lev kol echad ve'echad mishal kegufay shenem v'hafta re'ach kamoicha. So the Ram tells this mitzvah. Lefichach, therefore. Now this is the Heilige Rambam giving us the first and primary expression of Avos Yisrael. How would you fill that in? So the Rambam, Lefichach tzorach l'sape b'shvachoi. Why did the Rambam write that? Because the Rambam had verstanden a mensch. Or the Rambam understood the human emotion. Because the greatest chesed is when someone gives you a compliment. Whether it's yourself, your child, your grandchild, the shidduch you made, the chasana you just made, whatever it is. But the greatest expression of Avos Yisrael is with a kind word. Chayim b'yad loshen. I have a friend, Zayin Gesund, Choshem Arbitz Torah today. He always reminds me that he is today because of a dime. I think most people don't know what a dime is any longer. But it's a dime and a payphone. And that's certainly the younger generation doesn't know what that is. But let me tell you what happened. 41 years ago, he was Kamat 20 years old, and he said he had a very difficult family situation. His learning wasn't going well, even though he wanted to learn, but it wasn't going. He had a very difficult situation at home. And he decided, I can't do it. I'm going to go work. It wasn't so unthinkable in those days. He decided tomorrow he's going to go out looking for a job. That night that he made the decision, he got a phone call from someone in the yeshiva, who I know, brother, who says, you know me, I know you, and we're not best of friends, but you should know, I notice you don't look good. And I want you to know I'm thinking of you. And whatever it is, I hope you get out of it, because I like to see you smiling. And it's enough to me that I invested a dime. I put a dime in the payphone. Those that know my age know what we're talking about. He called from the yeshiva payphone before the cell phone era kapshutai. But he put the dime in the cell phone, and he called in the payphone, and he called to tell you that I'm there for you. And this phone call was like a tchiyas hamesim. Somehow, he doesn't know, but it gave him a new lease on life. A phone call is yesh kainam b'sha'achas. The Lambin says dibur is an aim by Maisa. But I tell you, dibur is chayim. Dibur could be a tchiyas hamesim for someone. And how about with parents? How about with grandparents? Was they have grandparents? You know what a phone call is? A phone call is that I'm very busy. I have my own einiklach, but I'm never too busy for you because you're my parent. Whether it's a phone call or a visit. But today it's not even a dime. And today you could even be doing something as you call him. And you could live getlichkeit, lahachyois, ruach shvalim, lahachyois, leiv nitkoyim. The person that had his marriage soured needs a little chizik, and there are so many people that need chizik, and a phone call. A phone, I'm afraid to say that, but it's true, is the biggest cheftzal mitzvah in our times. It's a chesed machine of taivas odam chazdoi. Rav Wolbe writes in his sefer that just like children can't survive without parents, parents cannot survive without children. And he writes the very brutal truth. Children are balibatim on the happiness of their parents. Because if they don't show the yachas that parents expect from children, it's like they close the light of life in their parents' neshama. Because you know what it means? When a child either says it or gives over the impression, I'm too busy for you, that's mamish a death sentence. A child's too busy for parents. And the difference is basically a phone call, besides visiting. But that's Sivav and Ahavas Yisrael. I'll give you another mashal. Anybody that has a drop of shaykhs in chinuch knows that the most important thing in chinuch habanim, children or talmidim, is compliments. Is positive imaging. And they say just like a plant grows because you water it, children grow because they're watered. How do you water a child? With compliments. They asked Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel's mother when he passed away, why was Zeich such a son, like Rav Nosson Tzvi? She said, I don't know, but I tell you one thing, I always complimented him. And God, when they asked him once why he made it, he said because his mother. The chizik got from his mother. And lav dafka mother. But life is a self-fulfilling prophecy. When a child is told he's good, he'll become good. Another example of chayim biyad loshen. Ain't it the same thing? And there's a world of taivas odom chazle. All you need is chayim biyad loshen. I'll give another mashal. Maybe it's hard to say, but it's hard not to say it. We live in a world torn with machloikis and families, neighbors, kehilois. Do we have to speak about what machloikis does? Look at Rambam's letter to his son. He says it destroys kehilois, families, cities, gedolim. He says run away from machloikis. And there's something called getlichkeit. I once gave this mashal. Imagine a proud Zayda is Zayich for the first time to feed his anicle. So he takes the spoon in his hand and he puts it in the grandchild's mouth. And as he does it, the grandchild smacks the Zayda with the left hand. Then he smacks with the right hand. And then he spits the food right back in the Zayda's face. Oh, the Zayda run away, right? Imagine he does it again. And again. And again. So either the Zayd is a Meshugana, or he's some type of Malach Alikim. You're putting food in his mouth, and he's patching the left hand with the right hand and spitting in the face. But Kaviyachal 1,000 times there is an Avinu of a Racham, and it does just that. State in time at the Devoy, right in the beginning, the Midah of Mikel Kamoicha. He says the Rebbeinu Shalom gives us life, it gives us hands and feet and mouth and neshama. And as he's providing us with life, pardon me, we spit him in the face with an Aveira. And he says even the Malachim can't understand as a Melech Olav like Bori Olam. And then there's someone that's a Mavata is living Adam Elyon in all its Yoifi. Someone that's willing to be Moichel, someone who did him wrong. That's the spitz getlichkeit of Mikel Kamoicha, the Melech Olav, in a way even Malachim can understand. I remember just about close to a year ago, someone sent me a transcript of a drasha someone said in Eretz Yisrael. Pity I didn't save it, I'll read it for you. But I remember Kamat the Lashon, where this Gadol said he heard from an Eight Shmiya, who was there in Nebuch, in Meron, by a terrible tragedy, and he was on a tire pot, so he survived. And he heard with his own ears that there's someone deep, deep down who was gasping for breath and said, I'm moichel, anybody that did this to me, even if it comes lidei misa. And you think, Shemei Shemayim, Rebbeinu Shalom, where did you get such children from? That person, that Kaddish didn't survive. But this was a new example of Yatzah Nishmasai BeEchad, with the greatest Kiddush Hashem in Yediyas HaTorah, Kuk was Torah Machta Mensch, a person who was gasping for breath, and his last breath, all he had in mind is to be Meichel someone else. Talk about Spitz Getlichkeit and Spitz the Heibenkeit. But this is a new Adam Elyon that I mentioned his last breath. Yatzah Nishmasai BeEchad. This is the effect that Torah could have on a person, that a person could be Kedoshim Tiyu without the Yachal Kamoini. And then you hear a story, Machloikis, I can't, why should I give in? Why should I be a Shmata? Why should I be a doormat? This is what life is all about. This is the Spitz Getlichkeit. Rav Steinman and Besoivim won a campaign. One Midah, he kept on talking about being Mavata. Because he saw what Machloikis does to families, to neighbors, to shuls, to kehilais. And someone was very kind to me. I quoted Lashon Rav Steinman said, Nar hayisi v'gam zakanti v'lo re'isi mevata mafsid. So he took a picture of Rav Steinman, his mamash's last days. He looked ancient, and he put on the side of the picture, Nar hayisi v'gam zakanti v'lo re'isi mevata mafsid. That's 102 plus years of experience that a mevata never loses. Adam Elyon. So much machloik, so much tsar could be prevented, but more so it's getlichkeit. And I want to mention another point, Karv Lalibi. We could say very proudly, we are in a door of Achsha Dora. The chinuch that our sons, our daughters have is probably unprecedented in history. The yeshivas, the koilim, the Beis Yaakov, the seminaries. And I wonder out loud, is there enough chinuch in bin Adam l'chaveiroi? Do our children hear enough that it's not just knowing Torah, but it's Yediyas Torah? It's not just learning Torah, but it's living Torah? We spend so much damim tarti mashma in preparing our children for marriage. But don't we all know that the aleph of marriage is midos toivas, being mavata? Is there enough chinuch in kedoshim tiyu, in trachting von jena, the Shema? A child is born, he's the biggest anoichi. It could be Erev Pesach, it could be Purim, a chasana, he cries, he wants. But we have to change that. I once watched in yeshiva, it was during the winter, and a Baruch, obviously he's a schwitzer like they call him, opens the window. So the other Baruch were cold, so they close it. So he gets up defiantly and opens the window. And my knee, cold, hot, cold, cold. Hot, cold. And fighting back and forth. And I'm thinking, where's the chinuch? He's training, he's fighting for ani la'atzmi. And then you have to know what Yediyas HaTorah is. There's a quote by Rabbi Chaim Briska. He once said the following. Imagine you go over to the Gadol Hador and you say, you point to, not me or you, an inch and points to Gadol Hador's head a gun, and you give the Gadol Hador a gun in his hand and say, if you don't shoot Joe, the biggest Amoritz, I'm going to shoot you. What's Talach? What does the Gadol Hador have to do? Is the Gadol Hador shooting? They're the biggest Amoritz in the world. So, of course, we start thinking, Chayecha Koidmin, and Kamoiches Lavdafka. But it's not true. Pikuach Nefesh, it's not true. It's a very smart Psachim, Chafayim Bebeis, my Chali Dami Dachsum Baktvei. So, Rav Chaim, there's not even a pasuk about that. There's no pasuk. Okay, the pasuk says Chayecha Koidmin. The pasuk says Pikuach Nefesh is Doicha everything. But the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us the Das Torah that without a pasuk, my chazi dami didach sumak tvei. That means a person has to be so yenim that my chazi has to dominate, that he has to give up his life and not shoot yenim. Now, of course, Taisus and Sanhedrin had the two stim. Teretz is doing a ma'isa, not doing a ma'isa. Ayin Sham Sanhedrin of Ayin Dal Lebeis. My point is very simple. The Torah Dika Hachkafa is we have to live my chazis. Why is the opening the window right if someone else is not happy with that? It's so simple. There has to be a training in my chazis. But that only works if we're chazis. I once saw this also. Someone bent down in Beis Medrash and picked up a piece of paper. He thought it was Sheamus. So he looked at it, and it wasn't Sheamus. He threw it down on the floor again. And so what happens? Another Yid comes along and bends down and picks it up again. My chazis, trachs von jenem. Is there enough chinuch in this attitude that we have to, that life is all about loyla atzmai? The Rambam in Hilchos Geneva, Perik Aleph Halacha Yud, that Bezdin has to hit a child that takes someone else's chayfetz. Frag the Magid Mishnah, but we paskin, cotton oichel nevelis ein Bezdin mitzuvin lafrishay. He's eating tarfus, there's timtum alev, but it's not Bezdin's business. So where did the Rambam get this, that a cotton that's stealing, that Bezdin has to stop him? Zok the Magid Mishnah, the Rambam has no makar for this, but near a poshit. Because even if he's allowed to eat nevelos, but bein adam lechaveroi, we can't let this go on. That means when it comes to timtum alev, Rahman al-Islan is not Bezdin's business. But it's never too early for bein adam lechaveroi. And then we start thinking, our chinuch system is magnificent. But is there enough of a dogish in the bein adam lechaveroi, which the Rambam and the Magid Mishnah say has to come before everything else? Isn't that poshit? That's the hatzlacha in bein adam lechaveroi, if there's a chinuch about it? Because a person by nature is not that giving person, but it needs a change. And if I have to say a sikum of today, I want to tell you a Gemara, Mavel Harayin. The Gemara, because it's in Brachas of Chav Zayin and Beis, when they deposed Rabbi Eliezer from the Nesius, Gamliel from the Nesius, they wanted to appoint Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah. So the committee approached him and they gave him the offer. And you have to realize that being a Nasi was the most prestigious appointment in Gans Yiddishkeit. It was like a Rosh Hashiva, a Manig, a Nasi, a Gadol, all in one. And they felt Rabbi Eliezer was qualified. So how did he respond? Ezel ve'imlech ba'anshe beisi. Like in America, I have to ask my wife what she thinks about it. I don't know about you. If I'm looking for a Manik Hadar, and he can make a decision on his own, thank you, but no thank you. I'm going elsewhere. You can't decide on your own. So I once said, I found the Aris Dvash has come out the same Yisoid. Of course, it was an opportunity, an unparalleled opportunity of Ruchnius, of Abatzis Torah, of Chesed. It was mamish, a dream of an opportunity. And the average person would be overwhelmed, such an opportunity. But Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah was not an average person. He was a Getlicha person. He was living Kedoshim Tiyu. And he was living Shema, Shema, Shema. And he understood that he's going to run and speak by the convention and the Kasiya Gedoyla and the Siyam Hashas, and he'll be running all over the world. And his wife is home alone, enduring the loneliness of four walls. And he says, of Ir Cheshbon, I could do it. I have to first ask what she thinks. He saw beyond Ruchnius and he saw Getlichkeit. He saw the Shema Shema, which is really defining what Avos Yisrael is all about. Now look, the Mitzchayis quotes the Yaris Devash, Kamat the same Yisoid. He was living Echas BeLev Echad. And that's the avoid of these days. You know, it's tremendous schus to mekabel the Torah, but the t'nai of it is Echad BeLev Echad. And that's trachting. It's one word, but there's so much to it. Trachting von jenem. Someone came to the Stipler once, so but he didn't hear well. So he used to write letters, Kritlach. And he had a problem, and he gave his letter to the Stipler, and the Stipler's getting very agitated. He's reading the letter, and he takes out a pen and starts marking things, and he's getting more and more aggravated. And the fellow doesn't know what he did wrong, but he wrote a problem. Suddenly the Stipler says, I know your problem, he says. I circled your letter. 13 times you wrote the word ani. That's your problem. That's the problem of the human being that's not getlich. There's so much ani. But then there's the person that's living loyla atzmoi. It's yenim. And he's living a world of unlimited opportunity of taivas odem chazdoi. Let me just be Messiah. I once thought about this. It's probably true also. The Baruch Shem created us. We have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 hands, and 2 feet. Why? I think it's pashut. Because you can't see well with 1 eye. You could see a much broader vision with 2 eyes. You could see more people. You can't embrace too many people with 1 hand, 2 hands. You can't hear Yanim Sar with only 1 ear. You could hear more with 2 ears. You could run to help someone else with 2 feet quicker than 1 foot. But it's only 1 heart. Because it has to be Echas BeLev Echad. If my heart delights in Yenim Simcha, I'll have more time to give him Simcha. If my heart feels good and my mother feels good when I call her, I'll call her more often. If my heart feels good that I'm helping someone, that undivided ahava, that's Echas BeLev Echad. And the schus of our Avas Chesed will be Zoychet of the ultimate Chesed of the Geula Shleima. Amen v'amen.
Gewaldig. We all changed from this shir. Echad BeLev Echad. B'Shem English, I'd like to thank Rabbi Smith for the wonderful shir. Also like to thank Yedidenu Rabbi Avram Aliyahu Spry for being out of the to big man mit Kiddush Hashem, beim schon Benchen mit Simcha v'Nachas der ganze Jahr zusammen mit alle Eden. Rabbi say, just like you see here, the shir big man mit Kiddush Hashem. We have 3 shurim today itself in Borough Park. We have many different neighborhoods of shurim in America and Israel, with thousands of Eden coming to Shir Torah Barabim, and we need the help of the tzibur. Whoever wants to sponsor a shir, please call Shir Torah at 718-851-8651, or email isd@yeshivanet.com, or you can bring your donation. Everybody would give 100, 180, wie viel kennen auf Yom Tov. The größte Chizik Limit der Torah Barabim was became Machazik sein. Please come over to one of the scholars of Shir Torah. The next shir will be Metz Hashem of the Skvere Dain in 10 minutes. Shalas and Chuvas and Dalat Chalke Shulchan Aruch. Again, in 10 minutes, the Skvere Dain will be in Metz Hashem. Shalas and Chuvas and Dalat Chalke Shulchan Aruch. Today, them will be afterwards Mincha. There'll be another Mincha later in the afternoon, Mincha 6:30. 6:30 Metz Hashem Mincha, and there'll be a shir, Shalas and Chuvas and Yonah Ribbis later in the afternoon between Mincha and Marav. 6:30 is Mincha. If you're going to be in Williamsburg, Metz Hashem, the shir 1 o'clock is by Rabbi Avram Shor. 1 o'clock by Rabbi Avram Shor, Metz Hashem. If you're going to be in Lakewood, Rabbi Yitzchak Sorotskin, Metz Hashem also 1 o'clock. If you're in Monty today, Metz Hashem, the Kosovo Rebbe, with your mincha ma vision to besmedish. Am kham le kashem rat kush bag zage soll fik hibram to mit shnem ar khavs mit sit ke yag dil to viad kadish. Amen. Many hey, shmei rab v'lam ma'it Amen.